and say, thank you, God, look where I came from. I came to this land with nothing, and look at all the blessings that you have bestowed upon us. And we say thank you to God. So what's amazing about this blessing is this whole mitzvah was only activated once the Jews entered Israel and settled the land. It took 7 years to do it, and until every single person had their land, even if I already was growing my fruit, until you had your portion of land settled, my mitzvah was not in effect. And it tells you, the Rebbe tells us from this mitzvah, the incredible power of unity, that only when can my mitzvah be full, and only when can I have true joy in my mitzvah, when I know that you have the same also. My joy is your joy, and your joy is my joy. That's really the Jewish way. And as we approach the holy days and Rosh Hashanah, it's all about being united as we approach God for a sweet new year. So this mitzvah reminds us of the power of Jewish prayer and the power of Jewish unity through our Thanksgiving. So thank you all for joining, and may we truly have that sweet new year as we stand together.
Thank you, Rabbi Landau, Chabad of Novato, and now I'm going to ask Rabbi Avi Raven from Chabad of West Hills to share a word of prayer, avoda.
Good evening, everybody. Would like to welcome everybody and welcome everyone from Chabad of West Hills and all.
And he froze. Well, we'll go on to Rabbi Eli and we'll bring back Rabbi Avi shortly.
Okay, welcome everybody from Chabad of North Irvine, the greater Irvine area. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess it's a blessing in disguise. It's not always that my brother-in-law freezes up on us. So take it, for those that enjoy that part. But as we mentioned, Rabbi Ezzy mentioned that we are in the month of Elul. We are getting ready for the high holidays in which we begin to blow the shofar every day in order to, so to speak, the sound of the shofars to wake us up. As is the cry from inside as we cry out to God. It's the innocent cries like a child calling out to God to answer all of our prayers. And therefore, we don't just want to show up on Rosh Hashanah unprepared, but rather we begin to make all our preparations for the entire month. So therefore, although it's via Zoom, it's not the same as hearing it in person, but rather to hear it during these days, it serves the purpose of waking us up. So we'll just blow a few sounds to remind everybody. And there we go. So therefore, just as we're all preparing for the high holidays, is going to be very different this year. But as a reminder, with all the craziness going on, to at least make it a point to hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah and to find inspiration in whatever way it is. That is all the Chabads that are participating over here are having a multifacets of different types of services to offer you to accommodate everybody, whatever comfort level that you may have. So once again, thank you all very much for joining us. And just by the way, any questions that you'll have towards the end of the evening, please write them out in the chat and we'll try to address as many as possible.
Thank you, Rabbi Eli. Rabbi Avi, are you back and able to continue again with the prayer?
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Perfect timing. Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. It's beautiful to be doing this event with everybody together. As is customary to say a prayer before we begin, I'd like to ask everybody to join me in saying the Shema, and we'll be having in mind, of course, for our promised land, for the land of Israel, for safety and security over there, for safety and security of the Jews all over the world, and in today's climate, for safety and security of everybody, and a speedy recovery for all those that need it. So those of you that would like to, please say along with me. We'll just say the first verse of the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. May we know of any good things, and we all say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Avi. So I will first give an intro to our speaker tonight, Ari Schonbrun, and before he speaks, we will show a video to get us into the setting of 9/11, and Ari will then begin his talk. So, and I should have my bio up here, and I didn't. Just give me 1 second. Here we go. All right, Ari Schonbrun is an author, speaker, and a 9/11 survivor. He was the chief administrative officer of Cantor Fitzgerald and Company, one of the world's leading financial services firms. He was responsible for overseeing and directing the day-to-day operations and administrative processes across Cantor Fitzgerald's capital markets group. Mr. Schonbrun was on the 78th floor of Tower 1 when the first plane hit on September 11th, 2001. He helped a colleague suffering third-degree burns to safety and was thrown into the national spotlight thereafter. His miraculous firsthand account about survival has been retold in the newspapers, magazines, broadcast outlets, and books. Mr. Schonbrun is a renowned inspirational speaker and the author of Miracles and Faith on 78. He draws the personal heartbreak he endured during the devastation of 9/11, deftly weaving in his capital markets expertise. After more than 3 decades of working on Wall Street, he speaks with energy, fluency, and wisdom, utilizing his humorous and engaging personality to stir and inspire audiences worldwide. He is also the creator of Decide, Change, Succeed, an 8-week group mentoring program focusing on becoming a better you. Mr. Schonbrun is a native New Yorker. He is passionate about philanthropy and serves as a board member of Strength to Strength, a global nonprofit organization that works with victims of terror across the world. Mr. Schonbrun and his wife, Joyce, live in New York. They have 5 children and several grandchildren. Thank you for joining us. I will now share my screen and so that we can play the video. Hold on one second. There we go.
I've been in love with the city of New York probably since I can remember. When I was a little boy in Brooklyn, my parents would take me to Manhattan. Well, I've always found the skyline of New York City a beautiful expression, a very dramatic way of what America is all about. I think the World Trade Center is one of the stronger, bolder symbols of American freedom, particularly economic freedom. And I like the impact that it had on the New York City skyline. I photographed it myself many times. And a couple of times, it was long before I was there, I'd actually go out in traffic. It's a little dangerous, cars would go around me, so that I could just get the exact shot of the World Trade Center. September 11 was supposed to be a fairly quiet day for me. It was a beautiful day.
We have something that has happened here at the World Trade Center. We noticed flame and an awful lot of smoke from one of the towers of the World Trade Center. My heavens, this is so good.
Pouring out. This gas goes from one side of the building practically all the way to the other.
We have seen a fireball, and I can tell you it appears tower number 2, at least from our vantage point, appears to be unaffected. This appears to be entirely in tower number 1.
I was told that apparently a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And we started driving down 5th Avenue toward the World Trade Center.
We are now looking at flames shooting out of the north side of number 1 World Trade Center, but there are at least some windows of the
And all of a sudden, I saw a big explosion of fire. And at that point, we all concluded, obviously, it was a terrorist attack. I think that was the first point at which I realized that we were into something different than any of us had ever prepared for, any of us had ever thought we would live through. I realized I was in some kind of a horrible, awful, horrific human experience.
People are standing in the street in tears. People are panicking and calling their families.
The mother described to me talking to her son on the telephone when the second plane hit. And that's the last time she talked to him. Another family described to me how their loved one had let 2 elevators down because he was older. People in the elevator were younger. Somehow my mind went back to the stories and think about the Titanic, or the people, a lot of the people that get on boats. They didn't get on the boat because they were older. And from that moment on, I started thinking that we'll never know all the heroes. We know our uniform people were heroes. They went there, they died, and they gave up their lives bravely trying to save the lives of other people. But what we don't know are all the individual stories of the person who gave up the elevator for another person, the person who calmed someone and got them out of the building, the person who organized their floor so that everybody could evacuate, the person who maybe in the last moments comforted people when all of them knew they were going to die.
I didn't look anymore after that. I turned and I started to run. Everyone ran. People just took off. People ducked in the doorway and people didn't.
This was an attack intended to destroy us, because we are a country that's built on principles of freedom. Because of free will, people get a chance to distinguish themselves. This wonderful American civilization emerges, which isn't based on any ethnic group, it isn't based on any one race, it isn't based on any one religion. It's based on people believing in freedom.
What's the situation right now?
The situation is that 2 airplanes have attacked apparently. What? All right, well, let's go north then.
So we all remember where we were on September 11th, similar to people remembering exactly where they were when John F. Kennedy was shot. I was in Australia at a wedding, so it was late at night. But the memory from then is as clear as it was then, it is today. And so we'd like to bring Ari on to share a few words. One thing I forgot to mention is a woman in our community asked me to mention her brother who was killed He actually worked for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 101st floor, Scott Schertzer, and she asked me to mention his name tonight as well. Without further ado, Ari, please share a few words.
Thank you, Rabbi. Actually, I knew Scott Schertzer. He was an incredible boy, blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful. I mean, just the nicest kid you ever got on to meet. So my condolences, of course, to his family. On September 11th of 2001, I was working for a company by the name of Cantor Fitzgerald. We occupied the top 5 floors of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center, the North Tower. That's the one with the big antenna. That's how I knew where to go when I went to work every day, which building it was, the one big antenna. We occupied the top 5 floors, 101 to 105. We employed 960 people. On that day, 658 of my friends and coworkers were brutally murdered, simply because they were sitting at their desks. There was no other reason. They never did anything to anybody. They never hurt anybody. All they did was go to work, and they didn't come home that day. 4 employees were on the way up. They were on the upper floors on the way up, and 3 of them suffered third-degree burns. They spent months and months in hospitals undergoing surgeries and rehabilitation, and 1 of them walked out without a scratch. And if you're viewing this, you're looking at that person. That was me. September 11th was a beautiful, beautiful fall day. It was a perfect fall day. You saw in the video, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was just perfect. It was 20 to 7 in the morning. I had my briefcase over my shoulder. I had my cup of coffee in my hands, and I yelled up to my wife, "Bye, I love you, see ya." Yelled up to my kids, "Bye, kids, have a great day in school." And I started to walk out the door. And all of a sudden, a voice from the 2nd floor of my house comes down, and my wife yells to me, she says to me, "Did you do Baruch's book order?" Well, I learned something very important that day. Teachers have a wonderful way of torturing parents. It's called the scholastic book order. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but if you have kids in school, this is torturous for the parents. What happens is the teachers give out these pamphlets, and they have like 100 different games and books on the pamphlet, and they send it home. The kids are supposed to pick out books and games in order to help them with their reading, to get them to like to read. Well, my son was 8 years old at the time, and he was no different than any other 8-year-old, where he wanted, like, I don't know, all the books and half the games, right, which we knew he wasn't going to play with or read. And my wife couldn't deal with it. Now, my wife is a school administrator. She worked in Benos Beis Yaakov Far Rockaway, and this was 1 week before Rosh Hashanah. So she was busy getting school open, busy preparing for the holidays, and she just had no patience for my son. And she turned to me and she said to me, "It's your job to do the book order." I went like, "Okay, I'll do it." Tuesday morning, "Did you do the book order?" "No, I didn't." "You're not leaving the house until you do the book order." Well, I'm a good Jewish husband. I put my briefcase down, put my cup of coffee down, walked into the kitchen, proceeded to negotiate with my 8-year-old for the next 20 minutes. I whittled him down to 2 books. I felt pretty good. Interestingly enough, the 2 books that he picked were from a series called Survivor. I got to tell you, when those books showed up a couple of weeks later, I looked up and I said, "God, you've got the greatest sense of humor in the world." It was eerie. It was really, really spine-chilling. So I filled out the tear sheet, wrote out the check, and put it into his knapsack. Oh, by the way, very, very important. Throughout my story, you're going to see a whole lot of coincidences that happened to me during the course of the day. But at the end of the day, when you put it all together, I'm sure you're going to come to the same conclusion that I did, and that was that it was the hand of God. God was literally looking out for me that day. And here's coincidence number 1. That book order was due on Monday, but my son left his pamphlet in school on Friday. Now, had my son brought that pamphlet home on Friday, I would have done the book order with him on Sunday. I would have been in my office on Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and somebody else would be standing here telling you a different story because I'd be dead. But because he left that pamphlet in school on Friday, I am here to tell you a story today. That's one. So I wrote out the tear sheet, put it into his knapsack, picked up my briefcase, picked up my now cold cup of coffee, and out the door I go. And I'm telling you, I was seething. I was so angry with my wife because that 20 minutes just cost me 40. So instead of being in my office at 8 o'clock in the morning, I didn't get to the Trade Center until 20 minutes to 9. I was so ticked. Now, my office was on the 101st floor. Now, you couldn't get to the 101st floor with one elevator. In the lobby, there were about 12 of these large elevators. They held like 50 people each one, and they were the fastest elevators in the United States. There was one elevator that was smack in the middle of the lobby that went from the ground all the way up to 106, which was Windows on the World, the restaurant, and it did it in like under a minute. I mean, you took that elevator, your ears would pop from the pressure. It was unbelievable. So I'm standing down, waiting for the first elevator to come down. The first elevator that comes down is all the way on the right side of the lobby. So I go running down to the end of the lobby, and I get into the elevator. We take it up to 78. 78 was a sky lobby. So you had to take the express to 78, then you change in the sky lobby for another elevator that would take it to the higher floors. So the elevator stops on 78, I get out, and the elevator that I need to get to the 101st floor to my office was all the way on the left side of the sky lobby. So I get out of the elevator, I hang a left, and I start walking towards that bank of elevators. I must have been about 8 feet from those banks of elevators when, as best as I can describe, there was an explosion. I thought a bomb had gone off in the elevator. The lights went out, the place filled with smoke, and I was thrown off my feet. I was on the floor. And there was screaming and crying and yelling, fire in the elevator. And I thought to myself, of course there's a fire in the elevator. A bomb just went off there. I didn't know any better. I had no idea. So people are screaming. I'm looking around, and I see that in between two of the large banks of elevators, there is a light. Now, I figured that's probably an emergency light because the lights had gone out. I figured, you know what? It's probably a good place to go. But there was a lot of smoke. And I remember as a kid, what do you do with a lot of smoke? You stay low to the ground, right? Well, that's what I did. I crawled from where I was to that light. And then I stood up, and I'm looking around. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. All of a sudden, I walk behind the bank of elevators, and there's a door. I open the door. There's an office there. It was a security office. Now, let me tell you something. I had been working in that building for 8 years. I never knew there was an office on that floor. The only thing I knew were the elevators and the security desk in the middle of the floor with one security guard. That's all I knew. I open the door. I walk in, and sitting on the ground is this woman security guard, and she is crying her eyes out. And I leaned over her, and I said, ma'am, calm down. We're going to be okay. We're going to get out of here. And she calmed down a little bit, and I walked further in. And inside the office, there was a guy who was the fire warden for the floor. Now, just as a point of information, in all the big buildings in Manhattan, every floor in these office buildings had one guy on each floor that was designated as the quote-unquote fire warden. He was like the go-to guy in case something happens. If management needed to tell the people what was going on, or there was an emergency, whatever, they would reach out to him, or he had a special phone and he could reach out to management. Now, I knew he was the fire warden because he had this silly red hat and it said fire warden on it. Now, I knew that because I had the exact same silly hat at my desk because I was the fire warden for my floor. So I ran over to the guy and said, what do we do? Where do we go? He looks at me and goes, I don't know. Of course he didn't know. We had no idea what had happened. We thought a bomb had gone off in the elevator. That's all. He started to try the landlines. Forget it. Landlines were totally knocked out when the plane hit. Cell phones, dead. Nothing. No reception. Nothing. I'm looking around. I don't know what to do. I figured, let me go back outside. Let me see if I can find a way out. I go back outside into the hall, and I bump into a coworker of mine. Her name was Virginia DiChiara. Virginia was on the elevator that I was about to get on when the plane hit. And as she described it to me, the doors of the elevator started to jam and started to close, and they jammed open a foot. There was the walls of the elevator collapsed, the ceiling collapsed. There was a cable that snapped, was sparking in the elevator. The jet fuel came down the sides of the elevator. It was ignited by the spark, and there was a wall of fire. There were 3 people in that elevator. It was Roy Bell, Virginia, and Renee. Roy Bell was the first one to jump through the fire, and he suffered 2nd-degree burns. Virginia was the next one out, and she suffered 3rd-degree burns. And Renee, she died from her burns. All in a space of 6, 8, 10 seconds. That was the difference between life and death that day, at least for these 3 people. So I see Virginia, and she looks at me, she says to me, Ari, please help me. Whatever you do, please don't leave me. Now, she was a total mess. She had 3rd-degree burns up and down her arms. Her hair was singed. Her clothes were burned. She was a wreck. And I said to her, Virginia, I promise I will not leave you, and we will get out of here. Now, here's the irony. Virginia and I were not good friends. You see, she was an internal auditor who had been hired a year before by Cantor. The first department she audited was mine. Needless to say, she didn't give me very good marks. As a matter of fact, she almost got me fired. And there we were, she and I. And I had a decision to make, right? I could have just hightailed it out of there, fun, you know, hey, tough luck, lady. But that's not who I am. That's not who we are. I knew that my job was to help her. God put me in that position for a reason, and my job was to help her. And I was going to do whatever it took in order to make sure that we get out to safety. And I said, Virginia, I will take care of you, and I will not leave you. I brought her into that office. I sat her down. I gave her to drink. You know, obviously she was very thirsty. She couldn't hold, literally, an 8-ounce cup of water. She couldn't hold the cup. That's how badly her hands were burned. But she was lucky, and it's funny to say that, because what happened was, before she jumped through the fire, she put her hands over her face. And the doctor said because she did that, her palms weren't burned and her face wasn't burned, and that's probably what saved her life. I just want to show you what she actually looked like. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this was weeks after. You can see her arms. That was the type of burns that she had. She spent 18 months in a pressure suit. She was it was horrible. So I brought her we gave her something to drink. I'm looking at the fire warden. I said, where do we go? He goes, I don't know. All of a sudden, another security guard comes walking in, and she's got a 2-way walkie-talkie radio. And I'm thinking to myself, there's help at the other end of that radio. But this woman's crying like a baby. I ran over to her. I grabbed her. I said to her, ma'am, you got a radio. You can get us help. You need to calm down. You need to get on that radio, and you need to get us help now. And she kind of snapped out of it, kind of. She was definitely in shock, all right? And she started to go, we're on 78. We need help. There was so much chatter on that radio. I realized help wasn't coming from there. I look at the fire warden. I don't know. He looks at me. We look around. All of a sudden, he turns around and says, okay, we can get out. Sterile on the left. Sterile on the left. I'll never forget those words. You know, when I walk into buildings these days, especially big ones, all right, I look for these little signs. You know what they say? They say exit. I look for those signs because I never know when it might save my life one day, because you know what? It certainly saved my life on that day. They said sterile on the left. I walked outside. I'm starting to look up, and I look up and I see it says exit. Whoa. I followed the sign. The exit had to go around a bend. There was another guy there who ran ahead of me. He opens the door at the end of the bend. He yells out, I found it. And I look inside to the stairwell, and I see that there are lights on in the stairwell. So I'm thinking to myself, they're probably emergency lights. I don't know how long they're going to last. But there was Roy Bell, myself, Virginia, the fire warden, about 6 or 8 other people. So I turned around to the people behind me, and I said, does anybody have a flashlight? Thinking to myself that if the lights go out in that stairwell, it will be pitch black. Won't be able to see anything. So does anybody have a flashlight? And 2 people behind me go, yeah, we got flashlights. And I'll never forget thinking to myself, where did you get a flashlight from, and why are you carrying it? It wasn't like today where we have the cell phones, the flashlights and the cell phones. We didn't have any of that. We had flip phones. That's what we had. And I was remember just thinking to myself, What are you waiting for Monty Hall to show up to offer you $100 for a flashlight? What is this? Let's make a deal. You know, but I said, folks, listen, if the lights go out, nobody panic. We will have light. And the next thing I did was I looked down at Virginia's feet and I said, thank God she's wearing flats. Because I'll tell you, there were high-heeled shoes in that stairwell all the way down. Women had just kicked them off to get down as fast as they could. Now, I'll give you another little interesting tidbit here. Most staircases in the Trade Center went down 10, 20, 30 flights. Then you'd have to come out, walk around the building, find another staircase, and continue to go down. This staircase went from 78 all the way to 1. How did he know? I have no idea. I never got the answer to that, but he knew. So I turned to Virginia. I said, okay, you ready? 78 flights, here we go. And we started to walk down. It was Roy Bell. It was the fire warden, Roy Bell, myself, and Virginia. That's the way we walked. We walked in a line. And I remember we did that. Why? Because I said to Virginia, if you fall faint, if you feel like you're going to fall and you feel like you're faint, fall forward, fall on me, and I'll carry you. Of course, Roy Bell turns to me and says to me, wait, you can carry her. I can't carry you. I says, Roy, I got it handled. Don't worry. And we started to head down. We got down 3 flights, 75th floor. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest miracles of the day happened to me, other than the fact that I wasn't killed when the plane hit. My cell phone rang. Now, most people today, they look at me and go, yeah, so what? Well, as I said to you before, the signal, there was never any signal in that building. I remember sitting in my office up against the window going, hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Anybody remember that commercial, the Can You Hear Me Now commercial, right? Yeah. They filmed it in my office, okay? Because we never got signal. It was unbelievable. So all of a sudden, my phone rings. I'm so, all of a sudden, I pick up the phone. I go like, hello? It was my wife on the other end of that phone. And she was crying, and she was telling me something about a plane going into the building. I had no idea what she was talking about. I said, Joyce, I'm in a stairwell. I'm on the 75th floor. I'm on my way down. Now is not a good time. I said, I'll call you when I get out of the building. And I hung up the phone, not realizing, of course, it would be hours until I actually spoke to her again. Roy Bell turns to me and says to me, oh my God, you got signal on your phone. Can I use your phone to call my wife? I said, of course. I handed him my phone. He dialed. He hit send. Nothing. Dead. I literally looked up and I said, thank you, God. Because it was very, very comforting for me to know that my wife knew at least that I wasn't killed. So that put my mind at ease. We continued on down. We got down to the 50th floor. Virginia says to me, Ari, I can't go on. Can't do it. My first instinct was I'll have her sit down in the stairwell. We'll give her something to drink. We'll pour some water. And then we'll continue. And I thought to myself, you know what? If she sits down, she may never get up. And if she doesn't get up, she's probably going to die. And that wasn't on my agenda for the day, not on my watch. And I said, no, Virginia, you can do this. And we gave her a cup of water and to drink. And then we started to pour water. Somebody had a bottle of Poland Spring water. We poured it on her arms to give her relief from the burns. And now I'm coaching. I'm counting the floors down. 45, 44, 42. You're doing great. You're doing great. And we were doing great until 38. And 38 was backed up with people. Hold on one second. This is kind of, okay, the reason it was backed up is because the firefighters were actually going up. So they were stopping the people from going down. So as we hit this huge crowd where nobody was moving, this woman in the crowd heard us coming down. She turns around, she sees Virginia, and she goes, oh! Virginia says to me, Ari, how bad is it? I said, Virginia, you look great. You're fine. You're gonna be okay. Reality was, she was in trouble. And I was really running scared because if I didn't get this woman some help real soon, she was going to die. There was no doubt in my mind. So I started to yell out, is there a paramedic in the building? If you're a paramedic, please, we need help. I have a burn victim here. If not, please step to the right and let us through. And they did. People squeezed over as much as they could, and they literally opened a path so that we can continue going down. We get down to about the 8th floor, and there is water all over the place. And I'm talking about ankle deep running water in that stairwell. And I turned to Virginia and I said, Virginia, take it real slow, because you know what? If she slips and falls, it is game over. There is no way I'm going to be able to pick her up. There is no way. I mean, it is game over. And we continued on down, and we got down to the first floor, and the fire warden keeps walking down. And I go like, where are you going? He goes, we got to get out through the garage. Ugh. So I turned to Virginia. I said, you know what? We just went down 78 flights of stairs. What's another 4 or 5? And we continued down. We got down 2 flights when all of a sudden the door on the first floor opens up and a guy yells out, where are you people going? I said, we're going out through the garage. The guy said, no, you can't get out through the garage. You have to come back up here and come out through the first floor. I turned to Virginia. I said, we got to go back up 2 flights. Well, she said a few things that I can't say in mixed company, or in any company for that matter. But we turned around and we headed back up. Now, here's the interesting point. Who was the guy who opened the door? I have no idea. I never saw him. I only heard a voice. And why did he pick that moment to open the door? I have no idea. But whoever he or it was saved our lives that day. You know why? Because when I found out later, there were people in that garage that never got out. We get out on the first floor, and sure enough, where am I standing? Right by the lobby of Tower 1. Hey, this is where it begins for me every day, right? Revolving doors, through the lobby, out the revolving doors, fastest way out of the building. But there are police and firefighters there that told us, no, go the other way. Go through the mall, go through the atrium. It was a long, long walk, whatever. But I'm a good citizen. I listened to police and firefighters, and God, am I glad I did. You know why? Because had we gone out the way I wanted to go out, it would have put us out on West Street. You know what was going on West Street? That's where the people were jumping. Now, we saw it. We just saw it on the video, all right? If I would have seen that live, I never would. I wouldn't be standing here talking to you today. I'd be locked up in some insane asylum. But thank God they told us to go the other way. And as we're walking out, Virginia says to me, Ari, please call my mom, tell her I'm okay. I said, give me the number, I'll punch it into my phone, but let's get out of the building first. And she told me later that it was raining in the lobby because the sprinklers were working very well down below. Where the plane hit, they were totally knocked out, but down below, the sprinklers were working really well. She told me every time a drop hit her arm, she said it was like a knife going through her arm. I couldn't imagine, at the time, I couldn't imagine what she was going through. But I'm going to stop here for a second just to give you a side point. About a week later, when I was home and it was Sunday morning, I was cooking eggs. And I'm like a neat freak type of person, right? And you know the little things where the fire comes out of, they're on your stove. Well, this thing was crooked, right? And I went, oh, crooked, that doesn't look good. So I took 3 fingers and I wanted to pick it up to straighten it out. And I touched it. And of course it was piping hot, you know, it was red hot. So I ran over to the sink, started pouring cold water on, oh, and then I stopped. And I realized, I said, you know what? That at best is 2nd-degree burns. And it's 3 little fingertips. Imagine what the pain that she was going through, all right, with 3rd-degree burns. I was at that point that I said, oh my God, I couldn't fathom it. So we come out around Church Street, and the police and firefighters telling people, uptown, everybody uptown. People are running uptown. I stopped the cop and I said, I got a burn victim here. What do we do? Where do we go? He says, go across the street in front of the Millennium Hotel. We're setting up a triage center there. There'll be ambulances there. Bring her over there. So across the street, and sure enough, an ambulance pulls up, and I help her into the ambulance, and I sit her down, and I breathe a sigh of relief, because at least now I know she's getting medical attention. Before, the only thing I can do is keep her spirits up, but I couldn't help her medically. Finally, she's getting medical attention. I step out of the ambulance. I turn around. I look up at the buildings, and there was a guy standing next to me. I said to me, excuse me, how did building 2 get on fire? And the guy looks at me like I'm crazy. He goes, what are you talking about? He says, 2 jetliners went into the buildings. They're calling it a terrorist attack. I look at him. I go, what are you talking about? I'm really running scared. I'm trying to call Virginia's mom. I get no signal. I'm trying to call my wife. I get no signal. I even asked it was funny, I even asked the EMTs over there. I said, you know why I'm not getting any signal here? They go, oh, because of all the equipment that we have here. Who are they kidding? They had no idea why they weren't getting signal. There was no signal anywhere in the city. Unbelievable. Anyway, so all of a sudden I realized she's sitting in the ambulance and the ambulance isn't going anywhere. So I turned to the driver. I said, why aren't you leaving? He says, we can't leave until we fill the ambulance. They needed to put 6, 7, or 8 people into that ambulance before they would leave because they were expecting a huge amount of casualties. Problem was, there weren't a huge amount of casualties. You were either very, very much alive or very, very much dead, and there wasn't a whole lot in between. So Virginia's sitting there. They wouldn't even let her lay down. She had to be sitting up, and she's writhing in pain. She says to me, Ari, I'm going to faint. The guy says, Virginia, hold on, hold on. Ultimately, they filled the ambulance. The guy says, okay, we're ready to go. And I'm thinking, oh, great, because as soon as that ambulance leaves, there's only one place that I'm going, and that's back into that building. Because I'm looking for my friends, and I'm looking for my coworkers, and I'm looking to help. That's what I do. So the guy says, okay, let's roll. Virginia turns to me. She says to me, Ari, you're coming with us. Now, I don't want to say I was in a comfort zone because what was going on, but the reality is I knew where I was. And if I needed to get someplace else, I would know how to do that from where I was because that's where I work, every day. I knew the area. The thought of getting into an ambulance and going God knows where didn't excite me. And I turned to Virginia and I said to Virginia, you don't need me anymore. I'm going to get a hold of your mom. She's going to meet you at the hospital. You're going to be okay. She turns to the ambulance driver. She says, we're not leaving unless he comes with us. The ambulance driver looks at me. I look at him. I see it in his eyes. He's thinking, this is not a cab service. And I'm thinking, I don't need a cab. But I look at him and I say, you know what? Maybe for our own psychological well-being, maybe I should just come. Looks at me, goes, fine, hop into the front. And I get into the front of that ambulance and we pull away. We were one of only a few ambulances that actually got away from the scene that day. I have friends who work for Hatzalah, the volunteer ambulance company. They showed me pictures of crushed ambulances at the scene. Who saved whose life? Virginia thanks me every single day for saving her life. And I said, you got it all wrong. If she wouldn't have insisted that I get into that ambulance, I would have been standing at the base of that building when it came down and I'd be dead. There is no doubt in my mind. But she insisted that I get into that ambulance. So we headed out. We went to St. Vincent's Hospital, and I'll never forget the ride. We didn't take the highway. We took the city streets. And there was one thing. It was people were just staring in utter disbelief. The people had still cameras and digital cameras and video cameras, whatever. But the scene, the look on everybody's face was the same. This look of astonishment, of bewilderment. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. We get to St. Vincent's Hospital, and let me tell you something, the doctors, the nurses, they were ready. The gurneys were there, the equipment was there, everything was ready for the huge amount of casualties that were gonna come in. They just weren't that many. So they take Virginia in, they start asking her, who are you, how old are you, and so I started answering all the questions because I knew all of her history. And we get into the emergency room, and then all of a sudden, all the doctors and nurses disappear. And Virginia's going like, Ari, I'm so much something. So I go out into the hall in the hospital. I said, hello, is there a doctor here? Hello, we got a burn victim here. I mean, I was yelling. I was like really, really upset. And all of a sudden, a nurse comes. She goes, "What's the matter? What's going on?" I said, "This poor lady. She's suffering. She's got third-degree burns. Everybody left. What's going on?" All of a sudden, the doctor shows up. He says, "What's going on?" I say, he says, "Who are you?" So who am I? I'm her coworker. Are you a relative? No, I'm not a relative. Well, you got to get out of here. You can't stay here. I'm the one who brought her in. What do you mean I can't stay? Hospital protocol. You're not a relative. You can't stay. I'm thinking to myself, we're under a terrorist attack and you're worried about hospital protocol? Really? This guy wouldn't give. He didn't care. You have to leave. So I turned to Virginia. I said to Virginia, listen, I got to leave, but I promise I'll get a hold of your mom. She's going to be here real soon and you're going to be okay. And with that, I walked out of the hospital. And as I walk out of the hospital, I hear somebody behind me say, wow, did you hear? Tower 2 collapsed. And you turned around from St. Vincent's Hospital, 7th Avenue and 12th Street. You had a clear view straight down to the Trade Center. And sure enough, Tower 2 was gone. Gone. 50,000 square feet per floor times 110 stories. And this thing was gone. It took them 6 years to build it. It was down in an hour. It was unfathomable. I'm really running scared. I don't know what to do. My cell phone isn't working. I start to look for a payphone. A payphone. When was the last time anybody in this Zoom used a payphone? Raise your hand, right? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Okay. All of a sudden, I see a guy walking down the street and he's talking on a cell phone. And I'll never forget, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? When this is all over, I'm going to find out who his carrier is and I'm going to switch to them. So I ran over to the guy. The stupid things that went through my mind that day is absolutely amazing, okay? But I ran over to the guy and I said, excuse me, can I use your phone? It's an emergency. The guy goes, yeah, sure. He says, listen, I'll call you back. Some guy needs my phone. He hangs up. He hands me the phone. I dialed. The first person I called was Virginia's mom. I told this to my wife 6 months later. She was so mad. She goes, why didn't you call me first? I said, I promised I'd call her mom. Hi, Ms. DiChiara. My name is Ari Schonbrun. I'm a coworker of your daughter, Virginia. She is alive. She's in St. Vincent's Hospital. She's severely burned. And then all I heard was crying and screaming, whatever. And then all of a sudden, a man's voice comes on the phone. I guess she handed the phone to her husband. I told him the story. Thank you very much. And I hung up the phone. I said to the guy, can I make one more call? He goes, sure. I mean, he heard the conversation. He says, sure. He hands me the phone. I dial my wife. I hit send. Nothing. Dead. I remember thinking to myself, forget that carrier. But I need a phone. What do I do? All of a sudden, I look around. I see across the street, there's a restaurant. Restaurant, they have phones. I go running into the restaurant. I bump into a waiter. I said, excuse me, can I use your phone? And the waiter looks at me and goes to me, well, it's not my restaurant. It's not my phone. I don't know. I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? I push right past him. And I run to the back. I saw two people on phones in the back. This woman's standing there. And as I get to her, she says to me, do you need a phone? I go, yeah. She goes, you're going to have to wait. I can't wait. You don't understand. This is an emergency. There were two guys sitting there. They were eating breakfast or lunch. I don't even know because I had no idea what time it was. The first time I looked at my watch, other than the 20 to 9 in the morning, was a 1:45 in the afternoon. I'll get to that soon. Guy looks at me and says to me, do you need a phone? My apartment is 5 doors down. You can come to my apartment and use my phone. Now, this is New York City. I'm thinking to myself, axe murderer? But I'm desperate, right? And I go like, yeah, sure, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And the guy goes, listen, I'm going to let this guy use my phone. You and I will catch up later. And the two of us walk out of the restaurant. We walk around the corner and we head towards his apartment building. And literally 20 yards past his apartment building, there was a payphone with a line of people on it. And there was one woman who comes off the line, starts heading towards us. And as she approaches, as she gets to us, he stops her and he says, do you need a phone? You can come up to my apartment and use my phone. You saw the look in her eyes, because now there were two of us. And she was thinking, rapists? She goes, no, thank you. And she keeps walking. We get to the door to his apartment building. He opens the door to the apartment building, turns to the people online by the payphone and says, if anybody needs a phone, you can come to my apartment and use my phone. Who was this guy? I have no idea, but he was an absolute saint. I remember he opens the door. I look inside. It is a 6-story walk-up. No elevator. I turned, literally. I looked up and I said, God, please let him live on the first floor. Because I was like really tired. And he did. He lived on the first floor. It was amazing. So he opens the door to his apartment. That's being very liberal with that term, by the way. I had closets that were bigger than this apartment. Remember, it's Manhattan, right? His apartment was so small, you couldn't change your mind in his apartment. That's how small his apartment was. It was crazy. Anyway, so I said, do you have a phone? He goes, yeah, there's the phone. I pick up the phone. I dial my wife, right? I get a fast busy. Trouble on the lines. Hang up, pick it up, dial again, fast busy. Hang up, pick it up again, fast busy. In the meantime, people from the line by the phone, by the pay phone, had started to come up. So a guy taps me on the shoulder. He says, excuse me, can I try now? And I go, like, sure, go ahead. He picks up the phone. He dials, goes, yeah, hi, honey, it's me. I'm some guy's apartment. And he hangs up the phone. And there's a woman behind him. She goes next. She does. Yeah, listen, I'm in some guy's apartment. I'm okay with that. I'm thinking, so give me the phone. But I was civil, not an animal. And I went like, do you mind if I try one more time? They go, sure. I pick up the phone. I dial. I get a fast busy. If I tell you, I was so paranoid, I thought it was a conspiracy. I thought they missed me at the Trade Center. They tracked me down here. They're going to get me here. That's what I thought. I was nuts. I said, can I try one more time? They go, sure. I dial and it started to ring. My heart is pounding. Finally, Space Yaakov, may I help you? Joyce Schonbrun, please. Now, my wife, as I told you before, worked in Space Yaakov. Joyce Schonbrun, please. Who's calling? Her husband. Hold on. No. And then they put you on hold with the music. But when they put you on hold, they put you on perma-hold. They put you on hold and they totally forget about you, figuring the music will satisfy you, right? Now, reality is it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds until she actually picked up the phone. And she picks up the phone. I go, hi, honey, it's me. And she starts to cry. Honey, what's the matter? Tower 1 collapsed. The last time she spoke to me, where was I? I was on the 75th floor of Tower 1. She was sure I was dead. I had 4 children at the time. My girls were 15 and 13. My boys were 8 and 6. She was wondering who was going to say Kaddish for me because my boys was not under bar mitzvah. She was wondering how she was going to tell my kids that daddy's gone. She didn't know what she was going to do. Baruch Hashem, thank God. We didn't have to go through that because I was very, very much alive. So she calms down and she says to me, they shut the city down, the buses, the subways, the bridges, the tunnels, everything is shut down. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? I go, yeah, thanks for the update, Zazu. I said, I don't know. Maybe I'll call Ellie. Ellie's my brother. He worked uptown. I said, I'll call him and we'll figure it out. But I'll call you when I get to my next destination. That was the hardest part of the day, not being in touch all the time. We're so used to being in touch with the cell phones. And even back then, we were pretty much in touch all the time. So I turned to the guy. Oh, the guy's name of the apartment, his name was John Roccasalva. Never forget that name, my friends, because he was an absolute saint. I'll never forget, I was like really tired. And I said to him, John, do you mind if I hang out here a little bit? I'm like really tired. He goes, sure, no problem. So I took off my shoes, my wet shoes and socks. They were still sopping wet from the Trade Center, right? So I take them off. He looks at me and goes, oh, your socks are all wet. Would you like a clean pair? You can have one of mine. Who was this guy? What is he, from Kansas? I mean, this guy was unbelievable. It turns out, by the way, he was not a New Yorker. He was from Columbus, Ohio. Okay? That explained a lot. But the guy was an absolute saint. By the way, I found out 5 years later, I found out that his phone bill from that day alone was over $300. And when the reporter asked him why, he says, it was the only way I knew how to help. I didn't know what else to do. So I figured, let me help that way. Guy was an absolute saint. A little strange. This guy, by the way, didn't have a mirror in his apartment, which I found to be very, very strange. Anyway, so I hung out for about 15 minutes and I said, you know what, I got to keep moving. So I said, John, thanks very much, but I got to go. I put my wet shoes and socks back on. I go downstairs and I figured to myself, you know what, I'll walk to my brother's office. Now, I was on 12th Avenue and 7th Avenue and 12th Street. My brother was on 48th Street and 6th Avenue. I figured I'll walk up there. When I get out of the building, I don't know where I am. I don't know where to go. So I stopped somebody. I said to me, excuse me, can you tell me how to get uptown? The guy looks at me like I'm crazy. He goes, uptown? Follow the crowd. Everybody's going uptown because nobody's going downtown. So, okay, I follow the crowd. I get to 8th Avenue and 12th Street. And I remember I had a friend of mine who had an office on 9th Avenue and 16th Street, but not just any office. He was a financial printer. So he had a billiard room, he had workout rooms, he had showers, people used to spend weeks at a time, on Wall Street deals over there. My problem was I didn't have a change of clothes. Otherwise, I certainly would have taken advantage of the shower. But so I come up to the office and I walk through the double doors and the receptionist looks at me. She says to me, Ari, are you okay? Now, I had no idea what I looked like because, as I said before, John didn't have a mirror in his apartment. I said, yeah, I'm okay. She goes, did you need anything? I said, yeah. A conference room, a phone, and some water. That's all I need. Because I realized how thirsty I really was. And they were so accommodating, and they helped me. They gave me a conference room, a phone, and I started to call everybody that I knew. I still had my cell phone, and it had my address book in there, so I was able to call people from this phone, from the landline. The only people I couldn't get a hold of that day, my parents. My parents live in Israel. You couldn't get an international line out that day. It was just not happening. But I had a niece who was living in Belgium. And my niece from Belgium called my sister-in-law in West Hempstead. And my sister-in-law in West Hempstead told my niece in Belgium I was alive. So my niece in Belgium called my parents in Petah Tikva to tell them that I was alive. So I knew that they knew that I was alive. Now, if you missed any part of that, ask me at the end. I'll give it to you again. But the important part is, at least I knew that my parents knew that I was alive. And that gave me a level of comfort. All of a sudden, a guy from the office comes. He says to me, "Excuse me, would you like some lunch?" I go, "Lunch? What time is it?" I look at my watch, 1:45. I said, "I really appreciate it, but I'm strictly kosher, so I don't think you could help me." He goes, "Oh, we have kosher clients here all the time. I'll just call the deli across town. There's a kosher deli." I went like, "They're not going to deliver." He goes, "Oh, sure, they deliver all the time." And I'm thinking, this guy is clueless. He has no idea what's going on out there. And I went like, "Sure, pastrami on rye, fries, and a Coke. Knock yourself out." Guy comes back about 3 minutes later, goes, "They won't deliver." Well, duh, really? Anyway, he felt so bad. He says, "We have a pantry. We have chip snacks and granola bars and orange juice. Help yourself to whatever." And so I did. I took chip snacks, granola bar, orange juice, sat down, ate my lunch. I got a hold of my brother, and my brother says we had an argument back and forth as to who's going to come to who. But at the end of the day, I went like, "You know what? I'll come up to you." Long story short, I tell the receptionist, if anybody calls for me, let them know that I went to my brother. And I started to walk out. I walked out of the door, and I start walking up 6th Avenue. And believe it or not, actually a city bus actually did pull up. And I took out my Metro card to pay, and this bus driver says, "Put that thing away. We're not charging today." I'm like, wow, this New York City changed or what? This is great, Well, anyway, she makes an announcement. I'm not making regular stops. You want to get off, ring the bell, and I'll stop the bus, whatever. Some guy rang the bell, 44th Street. I figured I didn't want to make him stop again, so I got off. I walked the 3 blocks to my brother's office. I ring the bell. "Who's there?" I said, "It's Ari Schonbrun. I'm here to see Elliot." "Just a moment, please." Buzz. I go in. His office was on a lower level, so you had to walk down 3 or 4 stairs. You walk through another set of double doors, and then there was one more set of double doors. And I looked through the doors, and I saw about, 20, 30 feet past where I was, my brother was standing there. And I saw him, and I ran to him. I grabbed him, I hugged him, and I cried for 5 minutes. I've been really, really strong that day. I needed to be. It was my survival. It was Virginia's survival. Now, finally, there was somebody that I could lean on, and he was my younger brother, and I just totally lost it, and I started to cry. And of course, what did he do? He started to cry, which was no big deal, by the way, because the Schonbruns are huge criers. You just ask anybody who knows a Schonbrun, they'll say, "Schonbruns, yeah, they're big criers." My father cried all the time, but we're big criers. And it was about 5 minutes later, and we calmed down, and everybody in his office wants to know, "Oh, what happened? What did you see?" And I was not in any mood to start talking about this. So I said to him, "Ellie, let's get out of here." We went out, we get outside. We heard there was limited subway service. We actually went down to the subway. There was a subway that took us out to Queens, and we took it to my mother-in-law's, where my mother-in-law lived. And I called a friend of mine. I had service on my phone once we got to Queens, and I called a friend of mine who owned the car service, and she said she'll send the car to pick us up and take us back to my house. My brother called his wife, told her to meet us at my house. In the meantime, it was going to be at least an hour until that car showed up because of the traffic. So I figured, let me try and call my parents. And I dialed my parents, and it rang, and my father picked up the phone. And I went, "Hey, Dad, it's Ari." And he started to cry. Oh, big surprise there. So I said, "Dad, why are you crying? I'm alive." And not only that, I know that you know that I'm alive because Avi Viet in Belgium spoke to Rini in West Hampstead. Rini says that to Avi in Belgium that I'm alive. And she called you to say that I'm alive. What's the matter? Didn't you believe her? He said to me, "No." He said, "I didn't believe anybody." He said, "I wasn't going to sleep tonight until I heard your voice." And I remember thinking to myself, man, am I glad I didn't wait till tomorrow to make this call. He would have gone a whole 24 hours out sleeping. So, what's going on? We schmoozed a little bit. It was interesting because the first thing he said to me was, "Are you getting paid on Friday?" I went, "I don't know, Dad. I'm not really sure." So the car comes, picks us up. I get back to my house. It's about 5:30 in the afternoon. There were 20 people in my living room, and I had no less than 100 phone messages. And I remember because back then it wasn't digital. It was these little micro cassette tapes. Does anybody remember that, the little micro cassette tapes? I still have that tape. I have nothing to play it on, but I still have the tape. But I had to return all those phone calls. I remember that. But I learned something very important that day. You have no idea how many friends you really have until they all think you're dead. because that's when they came out of the woodwork and that's when they all started calling me. The reality is I did learn a lot that day. You know, I worked on Wall Street where the motto of the day was greed. Greed. It was all about the money. There were guys who worked on Wall Street that were multi-millionaires and they were in the office at 6:30 in the morning. Why? The bigger house, the bigger boat, the bigger car, the nicer vacation, the next promotion. That's all they cared about. That's what life was all about. And I was guilty of the exact same thing until that day. My kids used to come in and say, Daddy, can you come on the class trip? We're going to the zoo. No, Daddy's got to work. Daddy, can you come to the class play? I've got the lead role. No, Daddy's got to work. Daddy, can you come to mock trial? You know, that's after school, so it's after work, so you can be there, right? No, Daddy's got to work late. Daddy's got to work, Daddy's got to work, Daddy's got to work. That was always the refrain until that day. Today, Daddy's on the class trips, Daddy's at the school plays, Daddy's wherever his children and now grandchildren need him to be, because that is what is important in life. There's nothing more important than that. But you know what? There's more to it than just that. Do you realize, like I realized, I was plucked out of a burning building and given a second chance? It was literally as if God was talking to me, he was telling me, all right, I'm giving you another chance. What are you going to do with it? And I took it to heart and I said, you know what? I'm going to make some changes in my life. Things are going to be different. You know, when I used to pray, it was by rote. You know, it was, you know, done, put the film away, put the towels away, all right? My davening, my praying started to become a little bit more meaningful. I started to attend a couple of more classes. I started to learn a little bit more. But I myself changed. I became a nicer person, a better person. Things didn't irritate me as much as they used to, because after you've been through what I was through, most of the stuff is nothing. It's meaningless. But you know what? If I really, you know, people ask me all the time, you know, why do you think you survived? Right? And I think, well, there are a couple of reasons why I think I survived. One is because I needed to do repentance. I needed to do tshuva, as they call it. Right? But more important, 2 years after 9/11, we had a baby that was 8.5 years after my last one was born. And when the doctors told my wife she wouldn't be able to have any more children. And 8 years later, 2 years after 9/11, my Yoni was born. So that soul needed to come down. And that's why I was around. But I think I also figured out why we were put here. And I know people think, you know, I mean, I'm not a genius and I'm not a prophet or anything like that. But in my mind, I think I got it figured out. You know why we were put here? We were put here to make the world a better place when we leave it than when we got here. And the way we do that has to start with each individual. Each and every person himself has to be willing to make those certain changes. You know, God gave us 613 commandments. Now I'm going to tell you, and this is not blasphemy, trust me, all right? There is nobody in the Jewish nation that does all 613 commandments. They don't, okay? Because it's impossible, right? For a myriad of reasons, it's impossible. So there are some mitzvot that only are in the land of Israel. And there are certain ones that are only for a Kohen. And there are certainly ones for a God. So you can't, one individual can't do all 613. So I tell people, don't worry about 613. Well, maybe 300. Don't worry about 300. Maybe 50. I said to them, don't worry about 50. So what do you want? I said one. I want one. I want you to take one mitzvah, one deed that you're not doing today that you could be doing. And I give them some examples. It could be like Kiddush on Friday night. It could be for women like lighting candles Friday night. It could be, you know, making a blessing on the challah. It could be giving more charity. It could be visiting the sick. And I tell you, there's a whole myriad of things that you can do to become a better person. And if you have a problem with what you should do, I said, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. They will help you figure out what it is you should do. But here's the point. Once you start doing that, once you take one mitzvah and you own it, you're going to see how your life is going to change. And once your life starts to change, you're going to see how the lives of the people around you are going to change. I'll give you a perfect analogy. If we were all sitting in a room, which hopefully one day we will be again, and I had a candle that was lit and everybody had a candle that wasn't lit, and I lit the first person's candle, is my candle diminished in any way? No, it's not. But is there twice as much light? Yeah, albeit not a lot, but it's still twice as much as it was before. And then you light, and you light, and you light, and you light, and you light. Before you know what we've done? We've lit up a room. And then you keep going, you light up a town, you light up a city, you light up a country, and you light up the world. That's how it's done, but it's got to start with your one decision. That's how you change the world. That's how you make the world a better place. I'm going to end with a short story. It's about this young executive, 35 years old, climbing the ladder of success, goes out, buys himself a brand new Mercedes. And he's driving through the city streets, and maybe he's going a little too fast, and he sees some kids darting in and out, and all of a sudden as he drives by, wham, his car gets hit by a brick. And he slams on the brakes, and he puts the car reverse, he pulls back, and he jumps out of the car, he sees this kid, he grabs this kid, he says, why did you do that? Why did you throw that brick in that car? Look at that thing, that's going to cost me, it's a brand new Mercedes. The little boy looks and says, please, mister, please, I didn't know what to do. You see, my older brother fell out of his wheelchair, and he's too big, he's too heavy for me to pick up. I couldn't get anybody to stop. I didn't know what to do. So he says, where's your brother? And he takes him by the hand. They walk down to the end of the block, and sure enough, in the gutter, there was a little boy and an overturned wheelchair. So this young executive takes the wheelchair, he turns it right side up, and he goes and he picks up the boy, he puts him in the wheelchair, and he takes out a handkerchief, and he wipes away the blood from the scratches. And the little boy starts wheeling his brother away, and he says, thank you, mister, thank you so much. And this guy starts walking back to his car with a lump in his throat. And he gets to his car, and he sees the dent, and he vows never, ever to fix it, because he never wants to forget what happened. You see, they say that God whispers to our minds, and he whispers to our hearts. But we're so busy running through life. We've got so much to do, so many things in our lives, that we don't have time to listen. So every so often, you know what happens? God throws a brick at us to wake us up and to remind us why we're here. Now me, I've had the brick thrown at me. You have a choice. You can listen to the whispers, or you can wait for the brick. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Ari, for those very moving words and an incredible, remarkable story. We have a few people here that asked a few questions, and if anybody else wants to ask questions, please write it up in the chat, and we'll see what we can pass on to Ari. So the first one over here, somebody asked, are you still in touch with Virginia? And also, how do you watch those images of the towers that we were watching at the beginning? How are you able to remain so upbeat and so positive?
So the answer to question one, Virginia and I became very, very good friends. We are in touch. She currently lives she moved down to Florida. She never went back to work. And every time she comes up to New York, we get together for either coffee or lunch or dinner or whatever it is. And I actually invited her to all of my events, my kids' weddings, bar mitzvahs, etc. She never came to anything, and she said to me, Ari, please understand, I can't go out into crowds. I can't do it. Well, today she doesn't have to worry about that because of COVID, but she said, please, and I totally understood. I totally understood. And every 9/11, we always talk to each other, regardless of where we are in the world. There was one year she was in Italy and I was in the States. There was one year I was in Israel and she was here, but we always managed to hook up and talk to each other on 9/11. We exchanged like cards on, Christmas and Hanukkah, etc. So we've become good friends. As far as the images go, I usually I know that movie by heart. Okay, well, first of all, because I've seen it a lot of times, and second of all, because I was there when it happened. But I don't really watch it when it plays for the audience. I don't really watch it. I have a lot of difficulty doing that because it does hurt. Sometimes I watch it when I'm in front of a live audience. All right, it's even more difficult. You'd never forget, and the hurt doesn't go away. All right, you're always going to be reminded of it. How do I stay upbeat? I stay upbeat because of my family. You know, my family was my strength. I'll never forget, it was in October, end of October of 2001, Cantor Fitzgerald had a memorial service for all those people that were killed. And we didn't have work that day, and it was going to be in Central Park. And my wife says to me, you know what? Why don't you take the girls with you? I went like, my girls were 13 and 15. I go, why do I need to take the girls with me? No, you take the girls. I said, Joyce, I don't need the girls. I'm fine. My girls, of course, they go, Daddy, come on. We want to go with you. Please, come on, we want to go. My heart melts, of course. And I went like, okay, fine. So they came with me. And I thank my wife every day, and I thank God every day that they came with me, because when they started to read the names and flash the pictures of the people that were killed, it brought back so many different memories. I just totally lost it. I totally broke down. And my kids were my strength. So my family is my strength, all right? When things start to go bad, all right, I know that I can, I know that I have somebody to lean on. So that's what helps me. I hope that answers the question.
Somebody else here asked if you happen to know the relative, Aaron Horowitz. There was a cousin of theirs that worked in Cantor Fitzgerald, but whatever it may be. If anybody else has any other, most people are making comments. If anybody else has any other particular questions? Somebody else asked over here, how long after 9/11 were you able to go back to work again, and did you continue working with Cantor Fitzgerald?
Great question. Great question. 9/11 was a Tuesday. I went back to work on Thursday. And the reason I went back to work on Thursday was because when Wednesday rolled around, my wife went to work, my kids went to school, all right? I had nowhere to go. I didn't have an office. My office was gone. It's like, I don't know where to go. I don't even know if our CEO was alive. I had no idea. I got a hold of my boss that day, and I said, John, where are we working? Where are we going? He says, we have a disaster recovery site in Rochelle Park, New Jersey, but it's really tight. Don't come. I said, no, you don't understand, John. I can't sit at home. Because the only thing I was doing at home, I was all by myself, was I was watching TV. When it was on the TV, it was the towers collapsing over and over and over again. I couldn't do it. I couldn't deal with it. So I went back to work on Thursday. And I continued working there up until April of 2017. In 2017, I said, you know what? I've had enough. It's over. And I left the company, and I started to just speak full time. I was speaking all the while. I was speaking on a part-time basis. And then I said, you know what? I need to do this full time. And that's what I do. I speak and I coach. Those are the things that I do. And I just try and help people. I try and make them understand the important things in life and how to be a better you.
I know that, Rabbi, as you mentioned to me, you work with a fund, a charitable fund for victims.
Yes. I sit on the board of an organization called Strength to Strength. And it was started by a young woman who was on a bus in Jerusalem that blew up. Everybody around her was killed, and she made it out. She was alive. And she started this organization called Strength to Strength because she wanted to help victims of terror. And the organization has grown, and now they have, I don't know how many volunteers, but they help victims of terror around the world. And they have many, many different programs. It's a tremendous, tremendous organization. I love it. And if anybody's interested, you can go online, stos.org, I think is the URL. But just look up Strength to Strength. The woman who started was Sari Singer, wonderful, wonderful woman. And she's just a powerhouse, right? She drives this whole organization literally almost by herself. But we've done a lot of good around the world, and I'm proud to be associated with the organization.
Okay, obviously as 9/11 is coming up, and the questions seem to have slowed down a little bit over here, of course, as this is still a little earlier, 2 weeks before 9/11, but of course that I want to mention that may the memory of all those people that did perish on that fateful day, that their souls should be elevated on high, and Hashem should continue to comfort all of their families, and their memories should be a blessing. If there's anything more that anybody else wants to add.
Oh, I do want to add that I did write a book. It's called Miracles and Fate on 78. And you can get it on my website. If you go onto my website, there's a little icon there that says buy the book. And if you put in the code that says August 30th, all one word, AUGUST 30TH, you'll get free shipping on the book. The book is $18, and you can get it from my website. And be more than happy to ship it out, autograph it if you'd like, for $3 more. No, just kidding, for free. And that's my story.
Nothing like a New Yorker's good sense of humor. All right.
Somebody just said,
someone's asking what the book is about.
The book is about my story, about my 9/11 story, because there isn't enough time to tell the whole story in an hour. So all the information, there's a lot of information in that book, including, by the way, 105 facts that you never knew about the World Trade Center.
Okay. Someone just asked one more time, what's your website?
AriSchonbrun.com.
Okay, perfect.
AriSchonbrun.com.
Well, I think we're done on our end. We appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much. Of all those that are here, it is being recorded. We will send out in the next few days, recording for those to watch back any parts you may have missed. Once again, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us and the very inspirational message. I'm wishing you a Shana Tova to you and your family, and only good blessings for everyone.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And a happy and a healthy new year to all the rabbis and to, of course, to all your constituents. Shana
Thank you
Tova.
very much. Amen. Shana Tova.
Okay.
Wow.
As